Hello and welcome to session 5 of the marriage course.
We hope that you're finding the course really helpful. The subject of this session is the impact of family, past and present. Family life has changed a lot over the past century. 100 years ago, fulfilling set roles was seen as the key to a successful marriage. Today, we think more in terms of the quality of the relationship. To illustrate how times have changed, here's some advice from 2 books published in 1913, Don'ts for Wives and Don'ts for Husbands by Blanche Ebert.
First of all, 3 don'ts for wives. Number 1, don't be discontented and think your husband not manly because he happens to be short and thin and not very strong. Manliness is not a purely physical quality. Number 2, don't let your husband feel that you're a dear little woman, but no good intellectually. If you find yourself getting stale, wake up your brain. And number 3, don't be afraid of cold meat. A few cookery lessons, or even a good cookery book, with the use of a little intelligence, will make you mistress of delicious ways of serving up leftovers.
And here are 3 don'ts for husbands. Number 1, don't refuse to play tennis or croquet or billiards with your wife because it's not worthwhile to play games with a woman. If she plays badly, show her how to improve. Number 2, don't sharpen pencils all over the house. It doesn't improve either the carpets or the servants' tempers to find pencil sharpenings all over the floors. And lastly, don't talk down to your wife. She has as much intelligence as your colleague at the office. She lacks only opportunity. Talk to her, explaining when necessary, of anything that you talk of to a man, and you'll be surprised to find how she expands.
Well, times have changed just a little bit. Although I must admit, some excellent advice about the pencil sharpenings. Very often, it's the different expectations of different generations that cause tension within the wider family. For me, as I think back, I remember very clearly the different expectations I had from my mother-in-law as to how we would dress our children. I definitely took the more casual approach of jeans and t-shirts, whereas my mother-in-law is much more traditional. Now, I remember her making our daughter a bright red corduroy pinafore dress and then matching shorts for our 3 boys. Well, my mother-in-law and I have a great relationship, and it was really kind of her to make them lots of clothes, but it certainly caused tension between us for a number of years.
In this session, we'll be looking at the impact of our wider family on our marriage, both through the way our upbringing has shaped us and through our relationships now with other family members. Today, there's no typical family structure. You may have very few relations, or it may seem like you have hundreds.
What was enhanced through the marriage course was to be careful to understand that she doesn't think like I think and she doesn't behave like I behave. I mean, where I come from, the husband is king and you're the king of your castle, and I'm in a different culture. He allows me to temper that and to actually embrace the freedom and the relaxation of what her cultural background was as opposed to mine. I did not jump on my parents' bed. My kids jump all over my bed and I still look at them like, did you just do that and stuff?
His culture is more stronger and more firmer than what we are used to here. And we've learned to be more patient, more respectful, and acknowledge each other's differences.
We kind of toned down those edges and kind of found a way for them to join together nicely. And I think it's somehow turned into an advantage, actually. And I really enjoy that we see 2 different perspectives from where we come from.
Even if neither of your parents are still alive, what we say will still be relevant to you with your wider family relationships, such as step-parent or brothers and sisters.
We'll start by looking at the impact of our upbringing. We all bring our family of origin into our marriage. Typically, we either repeat or react against the way our parents behaved, particularly when we're relaxed or stressed.
Some of the impact on our marriage will be positive and will be having a beneficial effect on our relationship. Some things will be different to the way our partner's family does things and may be causing conflict. And some of the impact can be negative and damaging to our relationship.
First, the positive. When we look back to our childhoods, most of us can generally find some good things about our upbringing. And even those with a painful past can usually find something.
Being raised by a single mom, brothers and sisters, we didn't have a lot, we had love. We were always laughing, my cousins were over all the time, big family. So when I met her and she said she had 3 sisters, she wasn't crazy about her relationship with her 3 sisters. She's like, why are your family's so open, so loving? And I said, we didn't have a lot, but one thing we did have was each other.
Being grateful for what was good in our own upbringing and in our husband or wives is important.
Secondly, the different. Every family has its own way of doing things. And usually we think the way our family has always done things is the right way and the best way.
There are many traditions in our family, of which you always have clam chowder on Christmas Eve. So in Amy's family, they were not quite the traditionalists. And so therefore, what was on the menu or what was to eat was not a big deal whatsoever. So there was not much thought that went into it. But in our family, large shrimp, because we grew up in Southern California, and seafood at Christmas time was a big deal.
Yeah, traditions revolving around food became a big deal in our lives. And which holidays to have different meals, and it's been a wonderful thing to see them kind of come together.
We have to work out as a couple our way of doing things. And that can be particularly hard where different family traditions are involved, as they will be over major festivals such as Christmas.
Our families are all spread out, and we don't get to see her family as much as we get to see my family. The time that we spend with my family is typically more, and it's less with hers. And so, particularly around Christmas, like we just say, Christmas is our week is with her family, and it's going to be Christmas every single year, and so we're not giving that up. It's been hard in some cases for the rest of our family to kind of deal with that.
When you're in marriage, you need to say what's right for us first, not in a selfish way, but we want to honor them and we try to be honoring to them. It's 2 people coming together first and leaving, forsaking the rest. And in marriage, that's what's going to make us or break us sometimes. That's what we found.
There may have been differences in the roles our respective parents took on in their marriage. It took Sarah and me at least 15 years of marriage to realise why we'd often make great plans to do things, but they never quite materialised. And it suddenly came home to us that in my family, it was always my mother who was the main organiser. She organised most of their social life, she answered the invitations, she wrote letters, and usually made sure there was fuel in the car. So I came into marriage assuming that Scylla would do these things.
In my family, it was my dad who was the main organiser. He answered the invitations, wrote and posted the letters, planned holidays, made sure we left the house on time to go somewhere, and he kept the car filled up with fuel. So I came into marriage assuming that these things would be Nikki's responsibility.
Which suddenly explained to us why nothing ever got done in our home. Now, there may be other differences in our expectations about male and female roles. If both of us agree on these roles, that's fine. However, for some, it's these different expectations that cause conflict and resentment.
The more aware we are of the different expectations we hold as a result of our different upbringings, and the more we look for solutions where we clash, the less these differences will be a cause of irritation and conflict.
Thirdly, the negative and the damaging. If we have a difficult relationship with a member of our wider family or hurt from our childhood that's still affecting us, that will put a strain on our marriage. If we haven't seen our parents resolving conflict in a constructive way, or we've never been allowed to talk about negative emotions, or we had a parent who always put work before time with the family, we can find ourselves doing the same in our own marriage.
Growing up, it was very much command control type of household, especially with my dad, and everything was very much performance oriented, and never good enough. Looking back, I could see how it has sort of shaped my behavior and the way I can express emotions, which were deeply suppressed. And it took a toll on Eunice and the kids because I felt that they were there and I'm sure I'll find time to spend quality time with them. But it was always somewhere buried on my checklist. And the marriage course made me, pause, put the brakes on things and say, where are your priorities? What's important?
This session will produce different reactions for different people. For some, it will increase their gratitude for their upbringing.
For other couples, it will reveal different expectations from their family backgrounds that are causing conflict.
For still others, it'll be distressing to recognise unresolved pain left over from the past that's affecting their marriage.
It's so important to address issues about our background together so that we can see where each other is coming from and move forwards as a couple. To help that understanding, we want to do a quick overview of what healthy family development looks like. And we particularly want to highlight the profound change that should have taken place in our relationship with our parent or parents as we grew up and then got married. A change from complete dependence on them to a healthy independence.
In this overview, we'll look at 4 stages of growing up. Even as we begin, painful memories may be starting to surface, and we want to encourage you not to be anxious. Even the deepest pain can be healed. And we've seen how marriage itself can be the vehicle through which healing comes.
As we go through the stages, please imagine yourself as the child in these 4 diagrams. The first stage is the early years. Initially, we were totally dependent upon our parents, hence we are inside the circle with them. Our parents took all the decisions for us. They set boundaries for our protection and safety. And they provided for our physical and emotional needs like security, affection, comfort, and encouragement.
We needed their unconditional love, a love that was not dependent upon our ability, our looks, or our behaviour. And ideally, they provided a role model of a good marriage by showing an interest in each other, spending time together, showing each other physical affection, apologising and forgiving, and by being faithful to each other. All of this gave a foundation of security and a model for our future relationships.
The second stage is when we became a teenager. As teenagers, we're now further away from our parents to show our increasing independence over such things as our hairstyle, our choice of clothes, friends, room decoration, and so on. But we still needed boundaries, such as what time we had to be home and insisting we went to school. And that's why we're still inside the circle with our parents.
And we still needed their emotional support, particularly when we were going through a lot of teenage angst. The dotted line from us to our parents shows that by this stage we should have started to consider our parents' needs and increasingly gave something back.
The third stage is coming of age or leaving home. This is the age around 18 to 21 years old of a transition to an adult relationship. We should by now be making our own decisions, hence the circle is just around us. We may have moved away from home at this stage and have started to learn to live independently. But equally, we may still have looked to our parental home for support. And some parents give support, but with unhelpful conditions attached. And this can lead to emotional manipulation.
We're going to look later at what we do if we feel our parents let us down in these stages of development, as that can have an impact on our marriage. But for the moment, we want to concentrate on the 4th diagram.
And that's when we get married. In marriage, we look to meet each other's emotional needs for security, affection, comfort, encouragement, and so on, as we looked at on session 1. Those same needs that were once met by our parents. But what's most important about this stage is that now the independence must be complete. And that's why both sets of parents are outside the circle. As the verse in Genesis 2 says, "For this reason a man," and of course the same is true for a woman, "will leave their father and mother and be united to each other."
This need to leave our parents is easily missed today, because in the West at least, most people who are getting married moved out of their parental home some years earlier. Yet the significance of leaving is not so much the physical move as the psychological and emotional one. It can be helpful to think in terms of the home, the family that we were born into being our centre of gravity, from which we moved out in ever-widening circles of exploration and independence.
But the centre remained. The home to which we initially had to return and to which later we would choose to return when we needed comfort or advice, or money was short, the washing had piled up, or because we just wanted to spend time with our parents.
The family home can often remain the place that we look to for direction and security. But after marriage, there must be a new centre, a new decision-making structure, a new home. Our highest commitment and loyalty must now be to each other. The apron strings must be cut.
It's not once you get married and walk over your own threshold that you're like, oh, this is my family now. It takes a long time to realize this is not my family anymore, this is my family. And now that there's 5 of us and we're a family, I think that shift has finally taken place fully, do you think? Mm-hmm. We've done a better job, I think, of saying, no, we can't show up at that thing, or we're not gonna fly out this week, or so that shift more of the leave and cleave to your new family has taken place more fully.
For some couples, this adjustment to a proper independence from our parents has never been addressed. The change in the centre of gravity hasn't happened. And some of us may need to examine whether we really have let go and left our parental home at an emotional level, even if we've been married for many years. If we haven't, it can put a serious strain on our marriage.
Something that was always difficult for me, standing up to my dad.
I didn't like the way that he talked to Monica or talked to his wife or my mother-in-law. And so I had many conversations with him where I would be like, as a man, you're to protect. It was almost like I was parenting him at times, because he always grew up dominant in the family, and he never had anyone stand up to him. And I loved the guy, and so I owed it to him, and I owed it to Monica and her mother to try to set those boundaries.
Joe, very much in a firm but loving and respectful way, was able to set that boundary, and it really felt like protection. It felt safe for me. I so appreciated him stepping in and doing that.
Putting in place some boundaries doesn't mean cutting ourselves off from our parents. We leave in order to connect in a new, positive way. Our relationship with them must change, and our parents must learn to relate to us as a couple in a relationship of mutual friendship and support.
We suggest you take a few minutes now to talk about your current relationships with whatever wider family members you're relating to. Parents, if they're still alive, or step-parents, grown-up children, children from a previous marriage, or siblings, for example. See if you can identify anything that's causing tension, and talk together about whether there's any unhealthy dependence between one of you and one of your parents, and what changes you could make. We want to look now at how we can build the best possible relationship with our parents or step-parents and in-laws if they're still alive.
If you're experiencing difficulties in working out these relationships, you're not alone. A survey by the UK organisation Relate showed that conflict with in-laws is the second biggest cause of arguments between couples. We read this story in the press recently. A man is so fed up with his mother-in-law that he's selling her on the auction site eBay. Steve Owen, aged 42, said, "I just hope someone will take her off my hands." He's invited bids starting at $1. He posted the ad on the site after his mother-in-law had bought a home round the corner. Steve said, "She comes to our house every day trying to change me and make me tidy." His mother-in-law responded, "He's lazy and I won't stop nagging him until he changes. That's my job." She went on, "But he could have made the starting bid $100.
While some families and in-laws can suffocate a marriage, others can be a help and give great support.
You know, a lot of times people end up saying their in-laws are their outlaws. Not here. I love them to death. You know, they're beautiful. They've always been a valuable part of my life. We talk, they send me clothes. The communication is just awesome. I couldn't ask for a better set of parents.
In terms of their impacts on our children, it's been great. Our children really love spending time with the grandparents. Their impact in our lives has just been much more of the advantageous portion.
We're going to hear now a variety of views from around the world about the impact of family, past and present, on marriages.
From where you come, what's been your upbringing, what's been your likes and dislikes, I think plays a major role in a marriage.
It's where you're coming from, that you learn, what marriage is about. You can't learn it in university, you can't learn it anywhere but from where you're coming from your home.
Mes parents ont divorcé, donc ça m'a appris à savoir un peu comment structurer un peu un couple, savoir vraiment essayer de s'occuper de gérer ça et faire en sorte que chaque journée soit différente mais qu'elle soit enrichissante quand même.
Family values that they installed in us, I think we've taken on ourselves.
Yeah, our generation is a bit different from theirs, so we can't be expected to follow the same, not values, but follow the same way they did things.
My family being Scottish and Tina's family being Chinese, I've learnt a lot. Different values to different continents and things, quite interesting.
I think we've taken the best things that we like out of each of the way we were brought up, and we have our own way of raising, our children now. So.
Parents brought up that person, so apple doesn't fall far away from the apple tree.
It's been difficult, and for me sometimes, and I think earlier, which I kind of wished I was like, it'd be a lot easier if I just went out with someone Chinese. I don't have to explain so much.
I like my mother-in-law. She's cool. She backs me up, so yeah, I haven't got a problem.
If that person that you love is going to be with you, you need your family to give you backup.
The worst thing is telling your parents when you've had an argument, because they will always remember that. Whereas the next day you've had a bunch of flowers and you've forgiven them. But the next time your mum sees that guy, she's going to kill him.
You can hear from those responses that one way or another, the wider family affects us all.
So, how can we build relationships with our families that work for our marriage rather than against it?
We want to preface what we say by telling you that we're under no illusion. Just as our marriage needs working at, so too do these relationships. We want to look at 3 principles which will apply to whatever family members we're relating to.
First, we must seek to resolve any conflict. Just as in marriage, unresolved hurt and anger lead to the drain being blocked, so it is with our wider family.
A relationship could have become blocked while we were growing up, or since we got married. Whichever it is, we can use the same process that we looked at in the last session for resolving those issues.
So, we need to start by identifying the issue, working out what the main problem is. Being open and talking about it with our husband or wife, maybe for the first time, will help us to become clearer about the source of the conflict.
Where there's been hurt on either side, the other 2 parts of the process, saying sorry and forgiving, make healing possible. We have to do our part. It's so powerful when we take the initiative and say sorry where that's appropriate.
That's hard, especially with family, as our pride can so easily get in the way.
As I said earlier, my mother-in-law and I have a great relationship, but from time to time over the years, one or other of us has said things that have been hurtful to the other. We're both at the rhino end of the spectrum, and I've had to apologise to her on quite a few occasions. But I remember one occasion recently when we were staying with her, and she said something to me that really hurt me, and I rushed upstairs in tears. And Nikki talked to her about why I was so upset by what she'd said. And she very graciously came and apologised to me, which I was really touched by.
When we've been hurt, we must choose to forgive. We'll be looking later in this session at how we might do that without necessarily talking to the person who's hurt us. But only we ourselves know if we're holding on to anger and resentment.
Keeping the drain clear of unresolved hurt and anger is important, not only for our relationship with our parents or in-laws, but if we have children, it'll also be important for their relationship with their grandparents.
Sometimes the arrival of grandchildren can help to heal the relationships with our parents or in-laws. A grandchild-grandparent relationship is very special, and we need to do all we can to make it as good as it can be, particularly if a grandparent is on their own.
I've had excellent relationship with my in-laws. I know she loves her mom a whole lot, and it's very important to my wife. And I got along with her mom and very early on and stuff. So in terms of their impacts on our children, it's been great. Our children really love spending time with the grandparents and stuff like that. So we've been lucky and blessed in that respect.
A second way of building the relationships with our wider family is to consider their needs. It's a great help to try to put ourselves in our parents' shoes. It can be really hard to understand when we're at a different stage of life what it's like for them. We can so easily see their faults, but it's so powerful when we recognise their needs.
We got married a year to the first date. It was a huge rush for her family, and her father, who is used to having control and not used to another male in the family because he has 3 daughters, was really struggling. He took me to the park when I wanted to ask him for his blessing for our marriage, and of course he threatened me with, taking my life and everything if I ever hurt his daughter and how special she was, and I actually really related to that very well because I thought, boy, if I ever had kids, and I would want them to be with the right person and want them protected and safe.
Personally, Stella and I have found it helpful where we've taken the initiative with our parents about things like phoning, visiting, enabling them to see their grandchildren, holidays, Christmas, and so on.
One of the 10 commandments in the Bible to honour our father and mother still applies after we're married. But how this looks in practice changes as we grow up. We're no longer responsible to our parents, but we become increasingly responsible for them. And as they grow older, they'll need more support.
We love what the marriage course says about your parents and honoring them and respecting them, and we fully believe that. I've read a book that I believe is so true: treat your parents the way you would want your kids to treat you when you get older. And that's how we try to treat both of our parents. Even when things have happened, even when drama happens, we've tried to honor them.
The moment might arrive when parents are totally dependent on us, as we were once totally dependent on them. As a part of the homework, there's an opportunity to think further about our parents' and in-laws' needs and how we can best support them.
Thirdly, as a couple, we need to make our own decisions. Many parents have lots of good advice to offer in all sorts of areas. If we possibly can, we need to appreciate it and listen to them. And certainly, Nikki and I have benefited hugely over the years from our parents' advice in lots of different areas. But a golden rule that we've learned is this: that we never decide on an important issue with one of our parents without having first discussed and agreed it together.
For example, we decided we wouldn't agree to go on holiday with them without having first discussed it with each other. Equally, it's been really important not to make financial arrangements and decisions with a parent without each other being fully informed and involved in the process.
Making our own decisions and then supporting each other in what we've decided is vital.
If you know that resisting control from parents is a particular issue for you, we recommend that you read the relevant section in the marriage book. For some people, it's when we go to our parental home that this becomes an issue. Our behaviour can change and we revert to the way we behaved as we were growing up. Whether or not that's the case for you, any of us can easily find ourselves supporting our parents' views against those of our husband or wife.
But for the sake of our marriage, we must present a united front. We must stand up for one another.
My family came over very early to the United States, and I'm a descendant of the signer of the Declaration of Independence. The household of that time had slaves. So my grandfather offered us a table which was the slaves' table from the house, which has been in the family since the 1770s. The table was shorter, the chairs were shorter than a normal table.
You can imagine how I felt being, Cherokee Indian and Native and African American. Those are very strong traits.
They didn't see her as a minority, and I don't think they treated her that way. The table and the chairs was more like an insensitivity of an 80-year-old person who was just trying to, what do you think? And it was like, I don't think. It's not coming to our house.
To have him stand at my side and knowing that that was a family heirloom. And I understood that from their perspective, but from mine, I could not accept it just from my own personal point of view. And he was okay with that, which was good.
We must refuse to take sides with a parent against each other, not allowing criticism of our partner by our parents or parents-in-law. And it's probably best not to criticize each other's parents. Supporting one another includes not giving away the ups and downs of our relationship.
Standing up for each other like this gives a great sense of emotional closeness and prevents parents or in-laws or other relations from driving a wedge between us.
We want you to hear now from our feature couple called David and Joy, who've been married for 3 years. They have a daughter and are expecting their second child soon.
Session 5 for me was very helpful because it was very relevant to me and us as a couple. We come from totally different family background. I come from a large family, David from a single child family.
Joy comes from Sri Lanka. I was born in India and I grew up in India. Completely different lifestyles.
I've got 4 brothers and 1 sister. We grew up doing things together as a family.
Being a single child, you learn to play on your own, you learn to make decisions on your own.
So we were a very close-knit family.
You really don't have anybody else to worry about. And also, you do not have anybody else to play with. You do not have that companionship.
The issue came up about 2 weeks before we were supposed to get married. We both of us were kind of under stress of preparing for the wedding. I was asking advice from my sister. I think David was finding it too much that my family was involved in the preparation. That made me a bit upset.
We said things we shouldn't
have said. I broke down crying over the phone, and my sister was right there next to me, and she said, "Are you sure you want to go ahead with the wedding?" So she thought she should step in and talk to David.
The issues that came up caused a bit of doubt in my mind.
My sister brought up the issue of me not eating when my mum died. I told this to David before when we were dating, but he didn't realize it was to the extent that I stopped eating for almost a year.
I thought I knew everything about this person that I'm going to marry, and I find out that I didn't. And I decided, well, it might be best to postpone the wedding and then come back and see, is this the right thing to do, or do we go our separate ways?
It took us a while to build up the trust between ourselves again, because I felt let down quite badly. We had to really take time out and see whether this was the right thing to still go ahead and get married. They had doubts and they said, "Are you sure you want to get married to this person? I was really finding it hard to let go of the closeness. I really had to make a decision to now start talking about how I felt and everything to David rather than to my family.
So it's been a process to move from depending on my mom for things and learning to depend on Joy for emotional support.
We stood up to our family and we said, this is the right thing. They stood back because they didn't want to interfere this time. Both families were present at our wedding. The day was very good.
Yeah, the day was very good. The process still continued even after we got married because there was a lot of healing that had to take place. At the beginning it was hard to rebuild. You have a lot of hurt feelings. They didn't want to talk to me. I mean, I started this silly little emails, jokes, and open up a way to communicate. Later on that year, Ruth, our daughter, was born.
I think it was a reason for everyone to get together because both sides were excited. They came straight away the day when we arrived back from the hospital, and then Debbie's mum also came on the same day, so they had to meet together and they spoke, and I think it was a process of beginning to heal.
Yeah, they were like, well, more interested in Ruth than they were in us. Yeah, I think, okay, this is good. Yeah, this is what our family is all about. And now we can just talk about basically anything. And last year we went to cricket matches with them and going on holiday together.
We had a Christmas celebrations here. It was the first Christmas both families were together, and it was great fun. And Debbie's mum was relaxed and she just was laughing at all my brother's jokes. You could see the families healing over the years.
Going from the time when we got married, when Joy's family wouldn't want to talk to me at all, to now we're hanging out together, I think has been a big improvement.
It was a real reassurance that things will work out at the end.
We'd like you to take a few minutes now to look in your manuals at those 3 principles for building healthy relationships with our wider family and discuss which points are most relevant for you.
It's worth being aware that something may not seem like an important issue for you, but it may be a very big issue to your husband or wife. Be prepared to hear them out and try not to be defensive if the issue relates to your own family. We're going to look at our past in more depth now and the impact our upbringing has on our marriage. It may be that when you looked at those different stages of family development, you were very aware of ways your parents or whoever brought you up failed in some way to provide a secure childhood for you. You may have felt a lack of love and understanding, or you felt controlled or abandoned. Sometimes buried anger from our past can come out against our husband or wife.
Miles, who's married to Deborah and who are great friends of ours, told us a story from his childhood. He grew up in Canada, and when he went to primary school, just before his 6th birthday, his English mum decided to dress him in a uniform of smart grey shorts, grey knee socks, black shoes and a tie.
Well, Miles kicked up a massive fuss, but his mother made him wear it. As Miles suspected, all the other children were dressed in jeans, lumberjack shirts and running shoes. And he came home from his first day utterly miserable with his uniform filthy from the pounding he got from the playground bullies. He was absolutely furious with his mother. After a couple of days, she finally relented, bought him some normal clothes, and the bullying stopped.
His mum continued, however, to exert a strong influence over his clothing. And the worst occasion was when he was 15 and he was visiting her in hospital where she was terminally ill with lung cancer. And they ended up having a huge row about his wanting to wear jeans to a friend's party. Well, the next day, when he went to visit again, she had somehow managed to buy a pair of yellow corduroy trousers for him. Now, he knew she meant well, but he said, how could I wear such a ridiculous outfit? But he felt he had no choice. She responded that he did have choice and produced an even more hideous pair of fluorescent green cords.
Miles said, "How can you disobey your dying mother?" When his mum actually passed away a few months later, he was shocked that his first reaction wasn't sadness, but relief. Great, he thought, now I won't have anyone telling me what to do anymore. He knew he should have been grieving and started to think there was something wrong with him.
Then, when he got married to Deborah, if she started to give him directions while he was driving, he would explode with rage. And if she suggested which tie he might wear, he had the same reaction. On the marriage course, he started to see that all of this was an automatic reaction to his mother. He felt that Deborah was trying to control his life when in fact she wasn't. And the course provided an opportunity to start healing her from the past and to forgive his mum for what she'd done.
And Miles concluded, "Deb really helped me with this. It felt wonderful. And I even ask her for advice on what to wear now, and she sometimes buys me lovely clothes. I'm definitely not perfect. I still react when Deb gives me directions, but it's much less frequently and with a lot less anger. I think she's quite relieved that the smouldering volcano has died down."
So, as we can see, the negative experiences from our past can influence the way that we react to our partner without us realizing it. It may be that we didn't have a good role model of marriage as we were growing up. Understanding what was missing can help us to change.
We both recognized that our parents could not communicate, did not have healthy marriages, and neither of their marriages lasted. And so as our relationship dating was getting more serious and we saw that, we wanted to get married and create a life together, we knew that we had to make a decision that we were not going to be like our parents. And so whenever I saw a tendency in me to basically follow the example given to me from my own parents, I kind of saw the little red flag go up. And I realized that this is an area that I need to work on and change. We've had to be very intentional about setting our new course.
It's only as we recognize where we have a fear of commitment that we can do something about it.
Admitting, even to ourselves, that our upbringing has affected us in negative ways is often a difficult thing to do. But we need to try and be objective. And that includes recognizing the strengths and weaknesses of our parents' relationship with us and with each other, whether or not they're still alive.
Typically, a young child's view is that their parents can do no wrong. Then, by the time the child becomes a teenager, their parents can usually do nothing right. An adult relationship involves seeing them in a more rounded way.
As Mark Twain remarked, "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much the old man had learnt in just 7 years."
An adult relationship requires us to accept our parents or step-parents as they are or were, rather than as we would like them to be. Of course, nobody's had a perfect childhood. Our parents will inevitably have let us down in one way or another, while for some people, their parents weren't around at all.
My dad had an affair when I was in high school, and I knew about it before everybody else. I went to my mother, and she made a choice to stay with my dad, and then my dad kind of distanced himself from the family for about a year. There are a lot of things that I loved about my dad, but there were definitely some things I told myself I did not want to treat her that way like he treated my mother. I never want to put her in a position where she has to doubt who I am as a man or as a husband.
Please turn now to the exercise in your manuals, Reflect on Your Upbringing. We want you to spend a few minutes arranging some coins around the circle Me in your manual to represent the relationships within your immediate family as you were growing up. Now, if you had a relationship with a member of your family, make the coins touch. If it was a close relationship, then overlap the coins. If there was no relationship, then separate the coins. So let's take an example. Let's imagine that this person has a close relationship with his mother and sister, and this coin can represent his mother, so it overlaps, and close relationship with sister, so that overlaps as well. This coin represents his father. His mother and father were divorced, they have no relationship, so we separate those coins. And this person has some relationship, but not a close relationship with his father, so it just touches the circle like that. And he has no relationship with his brother, so he's separated, but his brother does have some relationship with his father. When you've arranged them, then you can draw around the coins and mark in the names of the different family members.
Now, don't spend too long doing that. When you've finished, turn over to the next two parts of the exercise. B, which is your parents' or step-parents' relationship with you, and C, your parents' or step-parents' relationship with each other, and mark the relevant boxes. When you've filled in B and C, look at what each other has put and then discuss it together.
We recognise that the exercise you've just done is much harder and more complicated for some people than for others. And that's why we want to go on now to look at how healing childhood pain is possible. This last part of the session is particularly for those who experience pain and difficulties during their upbringing.
We don't want to drag these issues up for their own sake, but because, as we've seen, where there is buried unresolved hurt and anger from childhood, it will affect a marriage.
We want to mention 4 steps for addressing and resolving pain from childhood. And whether that's for yourself or for your partner, these steps apply.
The first step is to recognise unmet needs where our parents have failed us. We may never have admitted, even to ourselves, the hurt that we've experienced. It may be there was a lack of affection from our parents, or perhaps they failed to make time for us, or didn't give us enough encouragement or comfort.
Even if a parent or surrogate parent was abusive towards us, we may well have made assumptions as children that they were right to treat us the way they did. That's how children often think. And if you start to recognise buried pain, don't be surprised if strong feelings of resentment and anger start to surface.
The second step is to grieve with each other. Marriage can either make sadness we feel from our past worse or help to heal it. Recognising unmet needs from our childhood is a sort of bereavement. When someone is bereaved, they must be allowed to talk. Talking about what is lost brings healing. And there are commonly other emotions that go with bereavement, such as denial, guilt, fear, or anger.
Healing is a process with which we can help our husband or wife. One woman who'd come into marriage carrying hurt from her upbringing said to us, "Things take time to heal. Healing comes in layers. There's a need to talk things through. Being married itself is very healing."
When David married me, I think he thought he was marrying this sort of very confident, secure woman. But probably a few weeks, months, whatever, into marriage, it became more obvious as I started to trust him and was more open with how I was, that actually I was quite insecure inside. And a lot of that stemmed back probably from my childhood, where I was sent away to school at 8, and it was a boys' school with only a few girls. So it was very competitive. Negative emotions weren't something that were encouraged. And I found it quite hard. I was the only new girl the term I arrived, and was always desperate to try and make friends and not be alone or lonely. And I think some of those behaviours sort of went into adulthood with me, that sort of wanting to perform, wanting friends, and not really feeling like I belonged. But it was really healing, I think, through marriage to David, in just how he accepted me, how he loved me, And I really felt like I'd sort of found somewhere where I belonged. He really wanted to be with me all the time. He really loved me, whatever I did, whether I was having a bad day or a good day. And that was really healing. And I think I felt like marriage to David was like sort of coming home.
If your husband or wife has unmet childhood needs, it's so important that you seek to understand them and give them the gift of your emotional support.
There's a verse in the Bible that puts it like this: rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn.
And if our partner missed out on, say, affection or affirmation as a child, we'll need to be particularly sensitive to this. A lack of these things from us can make the situation worse.
I never had affection modeled with my parents, and that was one thing that when I got married, I obviously I wanted my affection, but I wanted to be intentional about that between Lee and I.
And
those
you
kind
need
words.
physical affection more.
So
yeah.
It definitely reaffirmed and reminded us of that.
For me to show him that I love him, I really have to be intentional about it.
It's wonderful receiving comfort from our partner, but we must be careful not to demand it. So, the second step is to grieve with our husband or wife.
The third step is to forgive. Forgiveness is essential for healing. We need to deal with anger from our past. And forgiveness involves giving up both the desire to get revenge and unrealistic expectations that our parents will now give us what we lacked as a child.
As we've said earlier, forgiveness is an act of the will. We may not feel like it, but it's the only way to be set free. And if we've been hurt deeply, the forgiveness needs to be an ongoing process each time the pain resurfaces. And as we keep forgiving, the memories will have less and less power over us.
Whether or not our parents have changed, or indeed even recognised how they've hurt us, we must choose to forgive.
It isn't always appropriate or sometimes even possible to express forgiveness directly to them. They may have died or be unaware of the pain that they've caused us.
I think it's never too late to forgive, even if you lose that person who has caused so much pain. I know just realizing my own limitations and my weaknesses and the way I hurt people unintentionally helps to form a little more grace towards people in my life who have hurt me. Even if I don't have a chance to resolve it with them in person, I can go to that place where I can admit that I mess up, and we all do, and realize that people's intentions may not play out the way that they had desired.
Some people have found it helpful to write a letter to a family member, expressing their pain and their decision to forgive. Then, rather than sending it, they may tear up or burn the letter as a symbol of their forgiveness and letting the past go. There will be an opportunity in a few moments to express forgiveness as part of a prayer.
Forgiving my dad in particular was huge for me. Forgiveness was hard. I worked a really long time. It's not overnight, but eventually I felt like I really was able to let go.
When someone's not physically there, if they've already moved on, that's when I rely on our faith, and that's when I think I have to really kind of turn it over and still ask, will you forgive me? Or, I forgive you, even knowing that that person's not there. I really have to have, I have to have faith. I have to have faith.
The fourth step is from a Christian perspective. Look to God and move on. Nothing is beyond God's power to heal and restore. We can ask God to heal the sense of loss for ourselves or for our husband or wife. We can ask him to be the perfect parent and to fill in what was missing from our past.
I'm going to say a short prayer now in which anyone can express their forgiveness to a parent or another family member who's hurt them and ask God to heal them from past memories. If you feel that's what you'd like to do, I suggest you close your eyes now and you can echo this prayer silently in your heart. Lord, thank you for your unconditional love for me and your willingness to forgive me freely. Thank you for the good things my parents gave me. I now bring before you the ways they failed me. Please help me to forgive them. Now, it can help to imagine that the person who's hurt you is standing in front of you and to say silently, Mum, Dad, or whatever term you normally use. You've caused me to feel like this through what you did or failed to do. Now, express silently what you feel hurt by. But as an act of my will, I choose to forgive you now. And then pray, Lord, thank you that you are a perfect Father. Please fill me now with your Holy Spirit, that I may know your love in my own experience. Thank you for your promise never to leave me, and thank you that you give your Spirit of love to all those who ask you. In Jesus' name, Amen.
We may well have brought up a lot of issues that you haven't had time to process during the session. And we would encourage you to continue to talk about them to help your partner to move forwards. But you may need to get help from another person if the issues are too overwhelming to deal with as a couple. We suggest that you finish this session by asking your husband or wife for one way you could support them. If you're both comfortable praying, please do so aloud or silently. If you're not, then express your support in some other way. I want to close this session with a final prayer, particularly for those whose marriages have been affected by childhood hurt. Heavenly Father, we pray that where a family background has affected a marriage, you would bring your love and understanding between husband and wife. Teach us to be gentle with each other, and please bring new courage and fresh hope into those situations where there's been hurt from childhood. We ask that you would help those who have been hurt to trust you for your healing love. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. We hope you found this session helpful and that you're more aware of how your upbringing affects your relationship.
Before you go, why don't you arrange some marriage time for this week, if you haven't already done so?
Thank you for joining us. See you next session. Goodbye.
Goodbye.